Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening to all of you. I'm Santosh Mudol. I'll be your host for the next session here. So we have another interesting talk coming up next, the Cyber Resilience Act and its implication on automotive industry. And this presentation covers different aspects about automotive companies expand the different services beyond vehicles uh, and also the understanding the emerging regulations is very critical. And this presentation will explore the EU Cyber Resilience Act, its interactions with ISO SAE 21434, and the opportunities it presents to strengthen the product security and compliance across the industry. So here joining us is Stefan Roche, a senior manager at Deloitte. He's specialized in secure product engineering and regulatory framework with an extensive experience in supporting OEMs, suppliers, and connected product manufacturers. So let's welcome Stefan Roche to the stage. Hello, Stefan. Stage is yours. Please continue the presentation.
Perfect, Santosh. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's great to be here. Yeah, welcome to my presentation about the Cyber Resilience Act and its implications on the automotive industry. Like said from Santosh, my name is Stefan. I'm a senior manager at Deloitte, and I've spent around about the last 8 years working in the automotive and product security environment. I've supported OEMs, suppliers, automotive software companies, and so on. In addition to the automotive industry, I was also active in other sectors and industries like medical device or the logistics. My focus has primarily been on engineering aspects and the regulatory landscape surrounding cybersecurity. And at Deloitte in general, we offer end-to-end services, leveraging our global network to cover more or less everything from advisory and implementation to operational support. Through this, we have, for example, our automotive pentest team in Hungarian, or our operate center, for example, in Spain, that supports our clients and partners with managed SOCs, for example, or code reviews, and so on. In addition, our team had in the past the hour to support especially the establishment, certification, operationalization of multiple cybersecurity management systems, especially at OEMs. And we are doing more or less everything in that regard, from operating models. We are supporting doing different stages from design to secure operations, also from an ECU component level up to the consideration of the entire digital vehicle ecosystem. And over the last month and year, our product security team has also focused on the Cyber Resilience Act, and especially in my case, on its implication for the automotive industry. And with this, I would also like to highly recommend you taking a look at our white paper, Navigating the Complexities of Automotive Cybersecurity. And we have tried to dive into the compliance stakeholder demands in the automotive value chain, make an introduction for that. In addition to that, we are also in the process of creating another white paper specifically focused on the Cyber Resilience Act and related governance structures. So keep an eye out for that. So now that we have set the stage, let's dive into the jungle of automotive cybersecurity regulations. A challenge that is, I think, well known for most of us. As you can see, the slides tries to illustrate the diversity of regulations impacting vehicle security. Most of us has likely spent considerable time dealing with type approvals for vehicle classes M, N, O, and potentially L. And in this context, depending on the regional applications, we have looked at EU regulations, EU NR 155, and the associated ISO 2144, for example. or the upcoming guidance for verification validation, or the CAL TEF. In addition to that, we have ordered the new GB standards from China, and with the 44495 standard that is now addressing vehicle security, which has slightly different requirements than, for example, the UNR 155. Furthermore, there are, for example, Indian requirements like the IAS 189, which is very close to the UNR 155, or many other in the global context. With this overview of regulatory diversity in mind, let's consider how the automotive value chain really looks like and how regulatory impacts them. The following slide illustrates the real or classic world. The interconnected worlds of an OEM, supplier, and meeting type approval requirements. OEMs, at the end, manufacturer had the responsibility for ensuring their vehicles comply with regulations like UNR 155. However, they heavily rely on their relationship, rely on their suppliers to provide secure components, documents, informations, and so on. In practice, we observed that the requirements shown before have passed on by the OEM to their suppliers, and some OEMs even add additional requirements or use frameworks such as the Vehicle Cybersecurity Scheme by the ENX. But the modern automotive landscape is evolving rapidly. Nowadays, OEMs increasingly offer services and features beyond the traditional scope of a vehicle type approval. Often through additional application, it's nothing new that an OEM will be seen as a mobility provider instead of a manufacturer of vehicles. This could include anything from remote applications to digital concierge services, after-sale related services, anything. Additionally, we have also more or less new market players which are focused on further mobility solutions or mobility or transportation as a services approach, which requires more than only the vehicle. As we delve deeper into the complexities, it's crucial to recognize that stakeholders can often have multiple roles. Traditional passenger car OEM may also be a supplier to others. Furthermore, there are also different vehicle classes, such as tractors, agricultural vehicles. We have heard it a couple of minutes before. This is significant because these different classes have distinct approval or certification processes. For example, the ISO 24882, which will come in future as a new standard for secure engineering for these classes, or for the agricultural classes. In addition to that, many companies in the automotive industry or sector are also manufacturers for products that are not exclusively used within the vehicle industry. These products may include pumps, motors, whatever, and these are also used in other industrial applications, for example, or they are off-the-shelf components. So there's a lot of things that are not clear related or clear restricted to the type approval. And as we move beyond the more or less well-defined regulatory space of vehicle type approvals for categories M and N and then L, we are coming closer to the new challenge, the EU Cyber Resilience Act. That is where the things get interesting, at least for the next minutes. And yes, there are further security-related requirements like NIS2, maybe something like a Data Act, AI Act, and so on, which should be considered as well. But for now, let's deep dive into the Cyber Resilience Act. The Cyber Resilience Act is a European regulation designed to ensure a consistent and reliable level of cybersecurity for all connected products sold within the EU market, regardless of where they are manufactured. In comparison to directives like NIS2, the Cyber Resilience Act is a regulation and does not need additional regional laws. So it came into force in November 2024, and therefore it's down on that level. The SAE affects all products sold within the EU that contains digital elements. This includes both hardware and software products, which has any kind of connection, more or less. It's important to note that products that are already covered by existing regulations, such as the 2019-2144 regulation for vehicles, are excluded from the Cyber Resilience Act. So we have the Lex Specialis concept. However, for example, special purpose vehicles that fall outside the traditional M&L or L categories are likely to be in scope of the Cyber Resilience Act. Additionally, the categories like TC, R, and S are also covered. Therefore, we have to consider standards like the ISO 24882 in addition to the CIA. And to complete the list, there are also other industries like medical device products, maritime devices, as well as products of aerospace sector or with impact on the national security that are excluded from the Cyber Resilience Act. Yeah, talking about the affected product, one concept is very important. The EU product legislation are talking about the intended use of a product. So that aspect defines also the applicability of the CIA. So why should you care about CR compliance? Well, on the one hand, it's a signal of quality, like security in general. But on the other hand, failing to comply can lead to some serious consequences, including significant revenue and reputational damage. We're talking about potential fines up to 15 million euros or 2.5% of your company's worldwide turnover, or the loss of the CE marking, and therefore the official access to the EU market. So it's comparable to other standard or to other regulations like GDPR or something like that. Looking ahead, the CIA has a more or less clear roadmap. The ultimate deadline for all requirements of the CIA is in December 2027, but there are key milestones along the way. So the most important one, that the incident and vulnerability reporting structures should be in place in September 27. And in addition to that, we can expect the release of various standards and implementation acts between now and then. So it's very crucial to stay informed on that. But we will come to that in a second. And yeah, the CIA outlines several key requirements. It emphasizes, for example, security by design as a fundamental principle. It also mandates security support over the entire product lifecycle, which is currently defined as at least 5 years. In this regard, it also defines requirements for updates. For example, secure distribution of updates or the easy-to-use opt-out mechanisms. Yeah, another key aspect of the comprehensive tracking documentation of components through the Cyber Resilience Act requires, for example, software bill of material. And therefore, we have guideline documents in place, for example, from the BSI, German Institute, at the technical regulation 03183, we have a first idea of how an SBOM could look like. In addition, the CIA also defines baseline requirements for customer communications, for example. And the CIA also requires a risk-based consideration of security requirements and the establishment of robust vulnerability management and incident handling processes. Yeah, and finally, it requires conformity processes, which are referencing to the CE marking or CE labeling process. So I've talked about the requirements of the CIA, but especially to the audience here, it could be that you are quite familiar to most of them, at least from a very high level perspective. Most of the requirement can be more or less easily mapped to UNR 155 or the ISO SAE 2144. For example, if we think about the secure by design or the risk-based engineering approach, which I've mentioned, it's more or less the main idea of the ISO SAE 2144, or the consideration of vulnerability and incident management. Yes, to be fair, for example, reporting structures or that are required by the CIA and are different. And also the wording that a product is free of exploitable vulnerabilities is something that is new, at least as a legal obligation. And on the other hand, the consideration of the entire product lifecycle is also something that is well known, for example, from the UNR 155, but not with a concrete minimum support time of 5 years. Last but not least, one requirement is more or less special for us, because we have different kind of conformity assessments or declarations defined in the CIA, which are separated between the criticality of the product. So we have a product which falls under the default category, which is a case in around about 90% of all products. A self-assessment would be sufficient. But for the conformity declaration in general, that is part of the CE labeling process, which is probably already well established in your company if you are not restricted to the scope of the vehicle types. And going a step deeper, the following overview tries to provide mapping of the CI requirements to the ISO SAE 2144. As you can see, many CI requirements are likely to be at least partially covered by the existing requirements outlined in the ISO SAE 2144. This is good news, as it means we are not starting from scratch. However, it's important to recognize that the CIA has a slightly different focus. For example, the CIA sets out specific obligations for different economic operators. It also includes further requirements around documentation, cooperation with authorities on vulnerability disclosure and reporting. We have also new aspects regarding customer communication and compliance with market surveillance. And furthermore, like I mentioned, this defines the conformity process based on the criticality of the product. In addition to the mapping with the ISO SAE 2144, our team have also prepared mapping with other regulations, guidelines, and best practices, for example, with the IEC 62443, or the draft version of the ISO 24882, to identify synergies and have a closer look on what can be used from other sectors, industries. So building on that comparison, it's important to understand that while we can draw parallels between existing standards like the ISO SAE 2144 and the CIA, that's not a perfect comparison, especially because we are comparing a standard and a regulation. So it's more or less unfair. If you look at the timeline, we see we are still waiting for the so-called harmonized standards to be released. The 3 horizontal standards are of particular interest here. They will include requirements for vulnerability handling, risk management, topic like supplier management. And theoretically, a clear comparison will only be possible once these standards are available. Unfortunately, we don't expect these standards until short before the requirements came into force. In fact, the planned deadline was 1 month before. In addition, there are already some doubts about whether these timelines can be met, as a large number of stakeholders involved in the standardization process, and each of whom wants to see their needs or the specific needs of the industry addressed. In addition to the horizontal standards, there are further vertical standards planned. You can see it in the overview on the right-hand side. And these standards will define more specific structures and requirements for distinct products, and these are clustered by the product criticality. In addition, there are also different organizations like PSI, VDMA, and so on. And they are also working on further guidelines, supporting informations to bring more light into the dark. Building on the standards and guidelines, let's shift the focus on how we have historically approached regulatory compliance, at least from my experience. particularly in the context of the CSMS according to UNR 155. As we are facing the new UNR 155 requirements back in the days, our approach often involves breaking down organization requirements and grouping them into something like security capabilities. From there, we had core process structures or journeys to meet the requirements. This allows us to create a CSMS-like structure relatively quickly, at least from a theoretical point of view. In best case, we also considered something like a cyber target operating model to thinking about how to set up required structures and to create cyber vision strategy and to integrate it within the organization. Unfortunately, sometimes the pain starts when combining the paper-based CSMS with the real engineering world or the complexity of different development items, which are following different approaches, for example. In worst case, companies have created parallel structures for UNR 155, the GB 44495, and now thinking about TR compliance. These structures that they only aim to suggest compliance and are more or less individual CSMS in worst case. Yeah, as a former developer, when I look at that challenge, especially in combination with the complexity and the changing regulatory landscape from a global perspective, and also if I have in mind that there will be more in the future, a design pattern came into my mind. Think of this maybe something like an model view controller architecture applies to product security compliance. So the separation of business and model from a view. The controller will be used to translate and communicate with the model and the view. In our case, we have our robust underlying model, the core security elements as part of a product security target operating model. These more or less generic and robust structures and processes are common sense for product security, and each product that has the aim to be more or less secure must be covered by these structures. And in addition, the first global standards now show us that there are certain comparable bases and that this is applicable. The tailoring then takes place depending on the regulation that must be applied. In addition, we had another layer that represents the specific requirements for type approval or other regulations. This layer would match security measures and organizational or process requirements to fit the specific legal or market demand. With in mind, we could have several advantages. Firstly, it provides flexibility. We are not locked into multiple branches per region or product scope. We can adapt the new regulation and market demands effectively. And many people assume that more countries or regions will follow the approach of the CR. Secondly, promotes reusability. The core security elements can be applied across multiple products and markets, reducing development costs and time. And finally, tries to support compliance by explicitly mapping security measures to regulatory requirements and ensure traceability. And yes, if you are very familiar with the model view controller pattern, it is not a perfect fit. Potentially, it's not even close. But think about it like a first idea and something to hate. Now, with that in mind, think about the CIA as well as our global cybersecurity requirements and use that momentum to create robust and effective product security capabilities, which are able to react on market demands in time, best case. We should talk about tailoring of processes instead of creating new silos and integrate requirements, required structures seamlessly in our organization under consideration of potential synergies. My default example are the reporting structures, which are required by NIS2 and the CIA. Why do you do not use the same structure with different sources and receivers? In that regards, be also aware and open for further best practices and approaches of other industries, for example. So at least from my point of view, it is quite interesting that, for example, the medical device sector has already defined SBOMs because they are required by the FDA. or that the conformity approach is quite similar to the CAA. Also, the approach of the intended use was not new to me because I was aware of the intended purpose from the medical device sector. In addition to that, we have to extend, from my point of view, the shift left approach. It will make business impact if your product will require specific regulation or not. So you have to have that in mind, and therefore you have to shift or to integrate security decisions into the business decisions as well, and for sure within the architectural design decisions. So let's conclude by addressing the core question. Is the Cyber Resilience Act relevant for your company? If you're selling connected products within the EU that fall outside of the scope of the EU regulation 2019-2144, or other specific regulations like MDR for medical devices, maritime, device, aerospace, the answer is a resounding yes. But please be aware that the CR applies to various roles, including manufacturers, distributors, and importers. And your company could also have multiple roles depending on the business use case. So now, should you be afraid of the Cyber Resilience Act? I would say it depends. If your company has a sufficient ISO SAE 2144 maturity, most of the CI requirements should be already familiar to you. However, there are challenges, such as the timeline, especially regarding the reporting obligations that kick in within the next 12 months. In addition, we have to consider the harmonized standards, but the reality is that most of companies can't afford to wait for harmonized standards and guidance. Another topic is general scope and regulatory edge cases. So should I really consider my anti-remote data processing solution? Or if yes, what does that mean for me? Or how does the due diligence for integrated free and open source software really looks like? And what are the implications if my products should maybe be available on the market without known exploitable vulnerabilities? Yeah, or one of my favorites, what is a reasonable foreseeable use and misuse, and how it should be considered within my risk assessment? Yeah, and last but not least, how does it work together with other regulations like the machinery regulation or the NIS2? Yeah, to sum it up, at least in our team, we have a lot of new friends from our legal team. And if the answer depends is insufficient, sometimes it's useful to accept the state that there are more questions than answers. But as a strong community, I got the feeling that we are turning open questions into shared answers. And I think that is a good feeling. And there are a lot of market players and institutes with the aim to increase the awareness about the CIA in addition. So there's currently, I think, no week without a webcast or webinar about the CIA. So is it just another layer of complexity, or maybe also a strategic opportunity for us? We believe that the CIA has a potential to fill gray spots within our value chain and enhance end-to-end product security. And if you are a multi-use product manufacturer or supplier or whatever, maybe your existing vehicle security structures can also serve as a strong baseline or starting point. Yeah, but remember, there are related standards that in guidelines that come in the future, and maybe you must be able to adopt these. Yeah, the rising regulatory complexity can also be the momentum for us to create robust product security structures and to ensure effective handling for the upcoming global regulations. So maybe keep in mind, maybe it's more an opportunity on chance instead of yet another regulations that must be considered for us. And with that, thank you very much for your attention and for your time. And I think we can start the question round.
So, perfect, Stefan. Thank you very much for the very nice explanation. very brief but very informative. And yeah, so we have a couple of questions in the chat. So I will bring them to the on stage, and so let's go through one by one.
Perfect.
So the first question, I'll put it on the window. Does the CRA implies to suppliers, or is it only required for OEMs? This is a question from Ahmad.
Yeah, it's a good question. The easiest answer would be that within the CIA, they don't call anybody supplier or OEM. So they don't have that terms or use that. But the real answer would be that you have to go through another document to the Blue Guide, for example, because it defines how products looks like. Because in that sense, we have an end product and the sub-products maybe that can be put together. And one thing that is also very important is that the CA is not only applicable into the B2C context. So also in the B2B environment, you have to ensure that your product is CR compliant if you're in the scope. So the supplier will be a manufacturer in our case if they sell the product within the EU market or the first market entry, or if that supplier is responsible for the first market entry within the European market. So therefore, yes, suppliers are also in space or in should consider the CIA as well as the manufacturer.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the answer. So let's go to the next one. Another interesting one. I will move to the main stage. Yeah. What about the US and Canada regulations? Is there any equivalent to CRA? It is in US and Canada?
Yeah. So at least as far as I know, there are no one-on-one comparison between the CIA and something that is in place or is planned for the US or Canada. As far as I know, most of the global players are waiting for the CIA. It's the first one on a global stage with that scope. They are waiting on how good it works, maybe say it that way. And if it will be in success, then I think that the US and Canadian organizations or standardization bodies or regulations will consider something like that. Yeah, but it is also a political decision and also a mindset thing, I think, because the initial aim of the Cyber Resilience Act or of the EU legislation on products that the EU have the aim to protect the European citizens. And I'm not sure if that is the same mindset within the US compared to the required level of freedom. I'm not sure if that is the best term, but hopefully you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So maybe the idea is another one. But I'm convinced that in the future something like that will come. Especially because from my perspective, most of the companies have to fulfill the requirements of the Cyber Resilience Act because it's no-brainer that you must be able to sell your products within the EU market. So if you as an US company were selling a product within the EU, you have to fulfill these requirements. So for it will be hopefully an industry standard like the UNR 145, maybe in a couple of years.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the detailed answer. Perfect. So let's go to the next one. What else questions are there in the chat? There is also one more. I will bring it to the stage. Does the CRA has the requirements around incident reporting time frame? For example, need to report an incident after X amount of time?
Yep. Yes, they have the exact time that is required. So after, I think, 24 hours, you have to notify your your CSERT or your and the ENISA about incidents. Then you have also another time for the more detailed report. So that is very clear defined within the regulation. In that regard, I think the most interesting question at the moment is, what should I report? So what is the content? Is it enough to send an email with, hey, BSI, I have an incident. I call you next week. So I think that is the most important question on that topic in the moment. And from a company's perspective, how I can ensure from workflow perspective to report incidents within 24 hours, because it's tough.
Okay, yeah, understood. So it's only the time is in or specified, but in what format, in what detail the reporting should be is what is unknown. You mean, right?
Yeah, we are waiting for further guidelines.
Yeah.
And I think Marcus from Conti or from Aumovio has mentioned it before on the panel. In the worst case, we will have multiple reporting templates formats for every CSERT available for every company that sells some product within your group structure. So it could be in pain in worst case.
Okay, understood. Perfect. Thank you. We have one last question, so I'll bring it on the stage. How does the CRA impact existing implementation of ISO SAE 21434 standard, clause 6, which is about cybersecurity plan, case, and assessment?
Yeah. So I would say they don't use comparable wording, and especially regarding that topics. My hint would be take a look at the standards. So as soon as the harmonized standards are out, so they are currently in a working draft state, so nobody knows how they look at the end. But something like that, that would be my good assumption, will be defined within that standards. Yeah, and not on the level of the regulation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Since we have a time, I was also thinking to ask one question from my side, especially on the CRA, just related to the first question, what was like, is it applicable to supplier or OEM? How does it relate to the CE marking? So in case if there are suppliers who are producing some components, they're not really selling to the end user, but some components, but they have the CE marking. And somewhere it is mentioned, what I also heard from or saw in the CRA is like, if you have to get the new CE marking, then CRA is more or less mandatory to prove the security. So can you put some thoughts or something around this topic?
Yeah. So it's very easy. So if you look at the CE certification, that is, so every company must provide that to their clients. You can see that there's a list of requirements that must be fulfilled to get this CE marking. And starting from the deadlines that I've presented before, the cybersecurity or the CIA will be part of that. So it's one of a bunch of regulations that should be compliant to obtain the CE marking or to get the CE label. So it's part of that, or it is the CE label from a security perspective.
So if I understood, then if we are already getting the CE marking for our products now, in future, we should also add a security requirements to get the CE certification for the same product.
Yeah, you should also consider cybersecurity if you have a connected product. So if you only sell or if there's products without any software and any connections, then maybe not, or potentially not. But if there's any software that's interconnected, then the CA requirements will be part of that CE labeling process.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Clear. So meanwhile, we got one more question in the chat. We could take it, I think, because of the time. So I'll just bring it up. Can our organization get a certified in compliance to CRA? Is there a certification scheme or something for CRA? What's the closest standard? Is the question.
Not as far as I know, and not in the official sense. So it's not like the CSMS, for example, in the automotive world, that we have that certified CR management system, something like that. That is not the case. Currently, it's focused on the product and that you require the processes that to ensure that the product is compliant. Potentially in the future, because it's an opportunity for the technical authorities, they will have a certificate or their house certificate for that the company is compliant to processes or something like that. But at least as far now, it's not required from an official perspective to have or to be certified as a company.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So now we are done with all the questions. If audience, if you have further questions, feel free to ask Stefan in the launch area. Also, after this, maybe for another 5-10 minutes, will be available. And first of all, thank you very much, Stefan, for just such a late session. Still, for a lot of you for joining such a late time, but it was really interesting. And thank you very much. And bye bye to all of you.
Thank you very much. Good.